Edward Layne, and I was in the Marine Corps, and I was a corporal when I got out.
Okay.
I got out in just before 68.
And what prompted you to, were you drafted or did you enroll?
Well, back in the early 60s, the draft was real strong, and I went to a Marine recruiter and told him I didn't want to be drafted. I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. And he said, he told me, he says, when you get your draft notice, bring it to me. And he said, I'll put you on the 2-year plan, and that's where you can join now. And it was a 6-month plan. You join now, go 6 months later, and then stay 2 years. And so I was talking to him either May and August, and within 2 weeks, I got my draft notice. I took him to the recruiter. He called the draft board and says, you can't draft this individual. He just joined the Marine Corps. And that gave me 6 more months on the street. And I was just right out of high school within a year. And I was already working, so I worked a few more months, and I had to report in San Diego in December of '65. And we left out of Indianapolis. I lived in Indiana.
Wow.
So that's what got me there.
And so this was for Vietnam. So thinking about that time in general and a lot of different types of turmoil kind of going on around the mid-1960s, what can you kind of set the scene for us? What did it feel like in the air around that time?
Well, I was more fortunate than others because I went in before a lot of the demonstrations started, and I got out before they started. I got in before all the drugs hit the military, and I got out before the drugs got in. So the drugs and the protesting and the dislike for Vietnam didn't come into play at about 68 or 69 and went all the way through the 70s. And I got in and got out. When I went in, it was still an honor to go represent the United States. And then later, if you study it, you know how bad it was,
Mm-hmm. Later on, and that was so that was really the 10-year war, right? So
yeah, I graduated in '64 and went back to Indiana. I didn't move down here till '62, and so I went up there and went to work, and I already knew I was going to go in the Marine Corps in high school, and I just waited for my turn, and that's when I went to the recruiter and asked him about what kind of programs they had, and he said he had this join now, go 6 months later program, and that's what sold me on it right then,
So you did end up seeing combat, right?
I got a Purple Heart.
Do you want to talk about that experience a little bit?
Well, it was, we'll work into it. What other questions you got?
What was did you have a specific job assignment?
Yeah, I was in clerical. I took care of all the military records. And I was in the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and when a person had to be transferred or got killed, I had to put all his paperwork together and get it to where it's supposed to go and keep all the records while they was in the field. And then we also had watch and ambushes and stuff like that. You tell somebody you're a clerk, but all Marines are Marines. It don't matter what your jobs are. And we was under a mortar attack that night, and it was after dark, and we had helicopters coming in, and they had injured Marines on them. And so, you know, when you're in a situation like that, your job's a Marine. So I was helping get the Marines off the helicopters that was injured and take them to medical. And I did that about 3 or 4 times. And when I was leaving the medical tent, a doctor stopped me and says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I've got some more helicopters I got to get the Marines off of." He said, "You just go over there and sit down. We think you've been hit." And my pants was tore and my shirt was tore, and I didn't even know it, because, you know, you're going back and forth, and so he said, we had corpsmen, which is our medics, and he told corpsmen to go over and look at me, and that's how I got the Purple Heart and didn't even know it.
Wow.
You know, later. Mm-hmm. And so I got through that and without crying.
Well, we understand. I appreciate your service.
So I stayed 13 months and 3 days when we had 5 different operations. And what an operation is where the whole battalion goes to a certain area to either, it's like search and destroy. You're searching for the enemy, and once you find them, you destroy them. And that happened in Operation Hastings, according to my my military records. And the biggest operation we was on was Operation Prairie, and we lost 1,300 in that operation. It was either we didn't lose 1,300, but we had 1,300 that's either killed or wounded in Operation Prairie, and it lasted about 2 months.
So it sounds like those were definitely among some of the most memorable of the experiences that you had. Can you think of any other moments that really still stand out?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of funny ones. We was out on a patrol when I volunteered for Point, and we was going across the rice paddies, and a sniper started shooting at us, and so I just fell right in the middle of the rice paddy and went underwater, and all of a sudden someone picked me up by the seat of my pants. He said, what are you laying down for, Layne?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "You ain't hit, get going." So that was sort of funny, and it was one of my first experiences of gunfire, and I didn't know what to do, so I just went head first. And he'd been there for a while. He just come up, picked me up by the seat of my pants, and told me to keep going. And another time, our first experience in combat, we was on a helicopter, and we were going in, and the ground fire was already taking place, and the helicopter couldn't get to the ground because of the enemy fire, and he told the gunner to get the Marines out of the helicopter, and I happened to be the first one at the door, and he throwed me out of the helicopter, but it was only like 8 foot, but you know, so I landed at rice paddy and just laid there because I didn't know what was going on, so that was my first combat experience. And about 2 or 3 months later, we were set up for another operation, and the British came in and they wanted to film The Phase of War was the name of their newsreel, and I volunteered to carry their cameras, and my buddy volunteered to carry their tripods. Now we were clerks, okay, but we had to volunteer to go out with the grunts. You know, we did things like that. Now their tripods wasn't like this. They was that big around, and they was about 5 foot high, and yet you carried them like a log. And the batteries for the cameras, they had to weigh 8 to 12 pounds apiece. And I had 3 batteries in my pack, and Donald had the tripods, and we were going across this river, and the enemy opened up on us. And I mean, there was Marines everywhere in that river, and you could just see the bullets going across the river. And I told Donald, I said, unloosen my pack. He said, what for? I said, I'm getting rid of these batteries. And see, every time we got hit, the movie people wanted to move to the front so they could get some action on film. And then when we were resting, they'd walk around interviewing Marines and that sort of thing. And I kept writing home and asking Mom. I said, now be sure and watch television because we might get on it. And the name of the newscast they were setting up was The Phase of War, but it was British and not American. So I don't know if it ever hit the States here. And so after he unloosed my pack went straight to the bottom, and he turned around and said, here, I want to get rid of these tripods. So I untied his little rope on his tripods, and they went floating down the river. So we got drove back. We had so much fire, we couldn't advance. So we got back on the sidelines on our side of the river and called in an airstrike. Every time you get hit, you call in airstrikes. And they get all set up, and they come up to us and said, where's our equipment? I said, it's in the river. If you want it, go get it. So after that firefight, they left the next day and they said they're going to go get more equipment, and they never did come back. And I think that was Operation DeSoto. You know, they name each operation that you're on, and the whole battalion goes, and a battalion consists of 4 companies, and then the 4 companies has to have a support group. And our company was H&F, that's the headquarters and service. But we were out with them, but we didn't advance until they advanced. And one time we were in one of our companies was in a firefight, and they captured I think it was about 5 or 6 prisoners. And I volunteered to take them back to the rear. And we set up 2 Jeeps and a lead Jeep and 2 Marines in each Jeep, and the prisoners was our passengers. And we had our bayonets on our rifles just for protection. And we left at night, and Da Nang was probably a 50-minute drive from where we were on Highway 1. They called it a highway, but it was a gravel road. And one of my prisoners started jabbering, and they were talking Vietnamese, so we didn't know what they were saying. And we got tired of listening to it. You know, they were sitting in the middle of us, and both of us was on the side of the Jeep. So I put my bayonet right there on his throat, and he got real quiet. And then I'd ease off the pressure. Every time they tried to talk, I just eased more on my bayonet, and then they figured out they better hush, because my buddy was doing the same thing. We had 2 Marines in a Jeep, 2 Marines in a Jeep, and 2 Marines in the lead Jeep with our high-ranking, like a sergeant, you know. And so then all of a sudden we got down. We got about 30 minutes into our drive, and they started jabbering again, but it wasn't like they was communicating. It sounded like they were praying. They thought we was going to kill them, and they just jabbered, like a prayer, because we didn't know what they was saying. And so when we got to Da Nang, we released the prisoners to the Marines that had the prison camp, and we met with an officer, and he told us we were done for the night. He showed us our sleeping quarters, and he said you can go anywhere you want to in Da Nang, but stay away from these different areas. And so we went out drinking, and the first bar we went into, this Army guy was at the door, and he says, "You guys can't take your weapons in this bar." I said, "This is the first time we'd been out of the field in 2 or 3 months, and I had 2 or 3 grenades on me already, just hanging on my shirt, and we had our rifles with our magazines already in the rifles." And he was sort of like a smart ass. He said, "You're not going to this bar with all this equipment on." And my buddy cocked his rifle, and he says, "We're going to go into this bar, we're going to have a couple beers, whether you like it or not." And he said, "Yes sir, yes sir." And so he took us in and gave us a seat. So we'd never been in a big city like Da Nang. I mean, it's like going to Chattanooga from the mountain, You'd never been there. And we sat there for a few minutes, and this Marine captain came over, and he said, "Can I talk to you guys for a minute?" We said, "Yeah." There was 5 of us, because we had 2 in each Jeep, and a couple of them didn't go out, and we ended up with 5 guys. And he introduced himself, and he said, "Listen, I want to thank you for what you guys are doing out there in the field." And then he thanked us for bringing the prisoners in, and he said, "What I want to tell you is Da Nang is not like where you came from in the field. There's certain rules here, and we'd really appreciate it if you went and put your weapons up and didn't come back." And we all stood up, saluted him, thanked him, and we went and changed clothes, came back, and from the rest of the night, everything was free in that bar. And that guy that didn't want us in, he came over, shook our hands, and everybody in there came over, and that's about all I remember about that night.
Sounds like it was a teachable moment. Let's see here. So many good questions I could ask you. How did you stay in touch with your family during that time?
How did I what?
Stay in touch with your family during that time?
I got a call home once. Barbara and I met just before I went to Vietnam. So we met at Tony's Drive-In, if you ever heard of where Tony's is.
Where is that?
And
Where is that?
well, it's in, where McDonald's is now?
Okay.
It was right across the street. That's where all the kids hanged out. And we met Barbara. I met Barbara, and we started dating. What did we go out a couple times? And then we started writing letters, and then my mother wrote me letters, and then my older sister. So I had 3 ways to get mail from 3 different people, and we were allowed to make 1 telephone call for the whole 13 months we were there. And it was then the telephone was radios. You had to say over, and then they'd connect you to your other party, and Mom would talk a while, and then she'd say over. And so we got to do that at least one time. So that was how we communicated, by handwritten letters. I got a couple from my sister still, but I don't think you and I kept our letters, did we? We've been married 53 years.
So how long after you came back, how long after that, did it take to get engaged and married after
see, the
that?
program was back then, if you had a job when you went into service, they had to give you an equivalent job at the same place when you got back. And so when I got back to Los Angeles, my duty station till I got out of the service was Quantico, headquarters of Marine Corps was in Quantico. It's where they trained all the FBI agents. And I made contact at work, where I worked at when I was at Quantico, and told them when I was going to get released. And they said, well, when you get released, you've got a job. And so that was a policy. I don't know if they got that policy now or not, but if you had a job when you went in, they was guaranteed the same job or equivalent when you got back. And I was working for Owens, Illinois, and the first thing I bought was a Corvette. And I had a Corvette for when I went in, and my sister would, every letter she sent me, she'd cut out a Corvette and send it to me. So I had them hanging all over my tent, and so I bought that Corvette in Indiana, but I took it to Quantico. I had a Corvette in Washington, didn't I? Because I drove it home a couple times, and so when I got released, I went back to Muncie, Indiana. That's where I worked, and we hadn't got engaged yet, have we? And
you didn't pick her up in the Corvette yet?
well, yeah. Think about it, she couldn't get in the Corvette because of her mom. She had to tie a little, what do you call those things? Headscarves. She wouldn't even let her leave the house without a headscarf on. And
so was it a convertible? Now I'm wanting to hear about this car.
Well, the second one was, I had a 63. It was a red ragtop. And when I went in service, I sold it. Then when I got out, I got a hard top. I went in a Stingray fan back then, and so it was a hard top convertible, the 65 when I got back, and so yeah, it was a convertible.
Cool. So in the 2 years, between when you left and when you came back, how were things different when you got back?
Well, see, when I got back in '67, the trouble wasn't on the street like it was. I mean, we didn't wear our uniforms out, but you could tell it was starting, because see, when you in the '60s, you wore your uniform to the airport, you got what they call a hop. You'd wait till a seat opened up and you rode for nothing. And we wore our uniforms everywhere. I mean, I picked up a Navy guy in Knoxville and took him all the way to Quantico one time when I was going back and forth home. I'd pick up anybody I saw in uniform, but now you don't have hitchhikers no more. A lot of people would, a lot of military would hitchhike home just by putting on their uniform, and I guess times has changed,
How did your service and experiences end up affecting your life beyond, coming back and working at Quantico for a while? what were some other ways that your military experience ended up shaping your life?
Well, I've wrote about all of my experiences already, and the Marine Corps is different than the other services. You know, you've heard the statement, once a Marine, always a Marine. Well, it don't matter where you go. If I got this hat on, someone will say something to you, you know. And I don't know, you always fall back on it, you know. Your rules, you know, you're just different. Training was different. The whole setup, you know, is you just learn by experience, and no one falls out, you know. We lost a couple in our platoon that couldn't make it, but they just go back to the next class, and then they work their way through again, you know. If I knowed you was going to talk about all Marine stuff, I would have thought more about what to talk about. But we lost a captain once. See, I volunteered since I was a clerk. Every time the grunts would have an operation, they had to have an officer with them, and it was either a captain or a blub. And I volunteered to carry his radio, because, you know, he's got to communicate with all the companies. And he was really, Captain Campbell was his name. And if you go into Google and Google Camp Campbell, they named a camp over there after him, because he come in one day and he needed a radio operator, and he came in to make adjustments to the tanks that was going to support his operation. And so he got them lined up for fire and calibrated them. And then my buddies, he asked me if he could carry the radio for him this time instead of me. And we sort of like took turns. And so when they got out there and got hit, the captain was going to call in support fire from the tanks, and they changed tanks on him. They didn't support him with the ones that he already got service and got calibrated, and the range of the tank shot into him and killed his radio operator and him, and that could have been me. And because we swapped out that day. And I've got a lot of stuff about Captain Campbell that I wrote, and I never gave her a story about different operations. This is the first time I've talked to anybody. Most stuff I sent her or Sarah Jane is military stuff, but not actually what we're talking about, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like some future storytelling that you'll have to do. That's really interesting. Before we have to wrap up here, Eddie, do you want to tell us a little bit about all the medals that you have with you?
Kirsten Conley is Tyler's sister. I don't know if you guys know Kirsten. Oh. Well, she went to D.C. 2 years ago and ran the Marine Corps Marathon. Barbara and I took her, and
all right.
Her and I got. Then she raised money for the Wounded Warriors. It's an organization, and you have to qualify. you have to get in line to get the Marine Corps Marathon because it's so popular. There's 32,000 runners in it. So you just can't call up and say, hey, I want to run the marathon. And so the way she got qualified was she joined the Wounded Warrior program. And that way she was raising money for the Wounded Warrior program. And the Marine Corps Volunteers has got a lot of organizations like that in it that raises money for different people. And so she qualified to run the marathon through the Wounded Warrior program. And then I think she raised about like $4,200 for the program. And so we took her to Washington for the run, and it was we wasn't experienced. I thought I could run all over Washington and watch her run, but you know, you got the rivers across, you got all the monuments, and we didn't get to see her at all. But Tyler and Diva rented a bicycle, and so they went out and saw her at 2 or 3 different locations. But Barbara and I we just stayed behind, and so I got wanting to do it too. And I said, next time when I quit work, I'll get in shape and I'll run it with you. And so I left the workforce last year, and we went to Jacksonville, and I ran a half a marathon there at probably 254 pounds. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I got to start losing weight. So that was 50 pounds ago. And we entered this. This is the Marine Corps historic half marathon. And if you run this marathon, you automatically are qualified to run the marathon. So we ran this back in February, before the pandemic hit, wasn't it, when we run this? And it qualified us to run in the Marine Corps Marathon. Then the virus hit, and they canceled it. So they gave everyone that had already qualified the options of rolling over to next year. And of course, they rolled over the entry fee and qualified everybody for next year. And then they came up with another program. If you want to run virtual, you can run a virtual marathon and still qualify for next year. And so they, when we ran it, they gave you a medal for both of them. Now this has got 13.1 on it and 26.2, and we qualified for next year. But this medal around my neck, it is the Iwo Jima monument inside this bubble, and it's got the original sand that the Marines hit the beach on. You can shake this and you can see the sand in it. And this is, I don't know if you're familiar with the Marines raising the flag at
Oh, that's my all-time favorite. Mm-hmm.
See, they're inside this bubble here.
That's
you have to get up and look, but everyone that did the Marine Corps Marathon this year got one of these, and it's the first time they'd ever done that like that. And you can shake it and look at and see the original. It's a black sand. It's not white and brown like ours. Their beach it was black, and so it's a pretty big honor. And so that's Kirsten didn't get to train much this year because she's in nursing school, and but she wanted to run anyway, and so we got some friends that helped us run this marathon. Nick started out with us. We started at the north end of the county at mile marker 30, and we measured 26.2 miles of my driveway in Mount View, and Beverly, one of her high school runners, joined us, and Nick Opperman, and they ran to the dollar store in Spring City, which was 7 miles. And then Caleb met us at the dollar store and ran, he ran another 8 miles with us. And then we, Tidwell Strawberry Patch, that little strawberry where you buy strawberries, that was the halfway point. That's 13.1 miles, because when Kirsten and I did the half, we started there and ran to Dayton. And we had support cars. Did you see the pictures? We had 3 cars on the road. One car would take the runners that needed to get back to their car. Then Barbara followed us for, I guess you was in the car 15 miles, weren't you, before you got relieved? Then Brooklyn Conley, which is Kirsten's sister, she helped take the people back and forth. And when we got to Tidwell's, there was about 10 people there cheering us on, and had signs made up. And then I planned to change shirts, because I started off with a yellow marine shirt, and then I finished with the red, because that's what we had in training. So I put the dates on the shirts. If you bring those pictures up, you can see a little date down here. And so every time we'd go up a couple miles, we'd have a different crowd. I bet we saw 50 or 60 people on the road waiting for us to run by them. Some of them would go by and blow their horns. And when I got to mile marker 17 on the running thing, I told Kirsten and Caleb, I want to start a 4-1. That's run 4 minutes and walk 1. Run 4 and walk 1. Well, every time we got ready to walk, I seen the crowd up there. I said, I ain't walking in front of them. So we just kept running. We kept going. And so that's how I got under 5 hours. I don't think I could have done it without it. Did the 3-1 and 4-1. Like this morning when I ran on my treadmill, I ran 4 minutes and walked 1. And it extends your running life a little bit longer when you do that, you know. And but when we got to our house, I bet there was 50 people there already, and we'd already made plans to feed everybody. So all we had to do was run the momos.
That was the only other running you had to do.
So that's how.
And if you don't mind my asking, you're 75?
Yeah.
So 26.2 at 75. And plus so as a result of all this training, you lost 50 pounds? Mm-hmm. Plus you got to wear a medal like that around your neck in a year like this. I feel like that is a good motivator to just keep going.
Well, I've got three of these already. I ran Chicago. Then I ran, the first marathon was from Kenosha to Chicago. I worked up north, and then when the Chicago Marathon come up, was you living here or up there with me? I was in an apartment one day. They came up for Chicago, and then see, I know Chicago like the back of my hand, because I worked downtown Chicago. And I know all the streets and everything. Well, you got in a cab, didn't you? I went the whole 26 miles and didn't even see her till we finished, you know. And then I continued training up there on a treadmill and a flat. Now this was, I ran Kenosha in 97, Chicago in 97, 98, and then I come down here and they had a Smoky Mountain Classic. I never run in the hills and the mountains before, so we went up there one Saturday, and it about killed me, man. So I'm not running in Tennessee no more. So that's why I picked the Rockwood to Dayton. We only had 2 hills. That was in Evansville, you know. So it was a nice flat run, and so I'm about to get in the mode of wanting to do a couple a year, you know. The half marathons since Jacksonville, Kirsten and I did 5 half marathons together, and it's really something when you could run with your grandkids, you know. Because when Kirsten was in high school, they won the district 3 years in a row. Then Kirsten was the number 2 runner, and Maddie, the number 1 runner, ran the marathon with us. She ran 7 or 8 miles with us Saturday, and she's a teacher up at Ray. So it brought back those kind of memories. Then Coach Holder saw us on Facebook. Then he puts in a comment about, look at this 75-year-old running, you know. So I guess Facebook's a good thing, and things like that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Definitely inspired a lot of people, I'm sure, by sharing your journey on. So for our last question, you know, in a year where there's a lot of turmoil going on, what would you say is, just from a veteran's perspective, why would you say it's still just so important to celebrate this great nation we live in and Veterans Day?
Well, I've thanked Sarah Jane many times about what the Herald does for the veterans, and it's sort of like a marathon. You don't know the experience of a marathon until you run one, and if you're in if you're out there, I can't even talk about it. I can't even tell you about the experience and what it means to me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Is there anything?
I mean, we can sit down and talk about it somewhere else, and with the people that's done it. But it's hard to talk to someone that ain't done it, you know. When you carry a Marine off a helicopter, it's just different. We went out once and they get these Marines on an ambush, and they were dead, and they had their ears cut off. The enemy had cut their ears off. How do you tell that to somebody, you know? And then it makes you so mad on the inside, so when you see a dead enemy, you want to do the same thing, you know? I don't know, it's just hard to tell you what Veterans Day means, other than the work you guys are doing. Every year someone will say, what are you going to write about this year? So I can write about it, but I can't talk about it, you know? And it's just hard. I mean, last year I wrote about my brother-in-law that was in the Navy, and who else did I write about last year? Who? Oh, I wrote about her dad, World War II, and I went on YouTube, and I followed him on every operation he was on. Crawford Bishop was her dad, and I wanted to honor him with a story. And one story I wrote about my uncle Clovis. that got killed in World War II, and he was a medic on a naval ship. And what's good about YouTube is I went into YouTube and I watched his burial. I watched every person that got killed on that ship. They buried them in Guam. And then the president wrote my granddad a letter and says, as soon as we can, we'll send your son home. His name was Clovis Smith. And I wrote a letter on, Sarah Jane printed it about 4 or 5 years ago. And you can really get some information off of YouTube. I mean, I got everybody's name that was on that ship. Everyone that's got killed. There was a Kamazaki plane. The Japanese the war was turning, so if their planes got hit, their purpose in life was to take that airplane right toward the ship and try to explode it into a ship, and that's what happened to my Uncle Clovis in World War II. And you learn a lot by looking somebody's name up and starting. We started in Alabama because on his tombstone he was buried in Evansville, but it's got Alabama on his tombstone. And what's that program I get into? Ancestry.com. I went into Ancestry.com, we joined it, and I went back and saw where Grandpa and Grandma and Clovis, and my mom is already married and gone, and Clovis was still home at 19 when he got drafted, and he got drafted in Alabama, so we went to the library down there in Alabama and got a lot of information, and then backtracked it to YouTube, and got the ship he was on, and pictures, because a lot of people did the same thing with their lost family members, and so I do YouTube a lot now, you know.
It's a good way to get connected, you know. Get connected to other people's stories too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for your stories today and sharing everything that you did, and thank you for your service.
I think I'll share some things with you that I haven't shared with nobody, except for when I write about it, you know.